Okay, Lily, what do you think? Should we get started to be respectful of people's time?
Sure. Yeah, I was actually just thinking that we need like some hold music or something, some background music to play while we're waiting for people to join.
Yes, actually, do you know how to do this? I know people have been doing like DJ sessions in Zoom. You can share the audio from the computer, but I've not done that.
I haven't done it either, and I actually just like was at something 2 days ago where somebody did it, and that was my first time experiencing it. I don't know. Looks like we have one more person connecting now. And then, yeah, I say might as well go ahead and get started. Also, I already told Sebastian, but I have to leave at the 30-minute mark. So I'm just going to, I guess, say Happy New Year to everybody right now before we get started.
All right, so let's get started. Let me share again the meeting doc because I see we have Logan that's just joined. And I think Logan and Manuel might be the two newcomers for today. So if you'd like, maybe we can start by introducing ourselves and see what we are up to.
Yeah,
Go
sure. Hi.
first. Oh, yeah, Logan, please go.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Logan Byers. I'm a researcher at the World Resource Institute. We're an environmental nonprofit working globally. I'm very into open data myself and data standards, obviously why I'm here. So just kind of excited to be learning more. I'm still probably early in the frictionless phase, but hoping to kind of learn a lot and really engage in the community. So thanks for putting it together and excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Manuel Spitzschon. I'm a researcher in neuroscience. I work in Oxford at the university. I'm quite interested in kind of data standards and packaging data up so that it's shareable. I'm kind of trying to early stages, I'd say, of setting up an initiative in my field to kind of promote or develop data standards. Really, I'm quite interested in this. And yeah, I'm glad to be part of this group and excited and eager to learn more.
I can be you. Yeah.
I'll do a quick one. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lily, and I'm the Frictionless Data Lead at the Open Knowledge Foundation. And I think I've either met or talked to many of you before, so it's nice to see you all for our last meeting of 2020. And Ilya, did you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ilya. I work on the Webrecorder project, and I'll be doing a quick demo of how we're using frictionless data. And we're still very new to this as well. And I think this is my second call, and we've just started adopting frictionless for our use case. And yeah, I'll be happy to share how we're doing that.
Yeah, I can be next now. I have two hats. One, I'm a software engineer at the Swiss Polo Institute, and we use frictionless to pass data to one of our panels. And the second one, I just finished tool fund from frictionless to do a schema collaboration. Is the name of the tool fund is to help data managers and scientists to collaborate easier to describe data sets.
I can go. I'm Emma Dixon. This is my first call. I also work on Webrecorder, and I'm excited to do a little bit of a presentation about it and to keep talking to you guys.
I guess I'll go next quick. Hi, everyone. I'm Blake. I'm based in Switzerland, where I help to run the Swiss Open Knowledge Chapter, and I run a lot of hackathon type activities. So, getting people to participate in kind of data literacy projects, and I've been working with the Frictionless Data team for a few years. I also run a startup called Civity, which is presented on this call a few times this year, where we are trying to put frictionless data tools to use for urban planning projects. really happy to have a chance to mark the end of the year with you here today. Oh, and Manuel, can I just ask a very quick question? Manuel?
Yes.
Do you know Zoltan Molnar by any chance?
I know of him, but I don't think we've ever met in person.
Okay, so just trying to figure out what kind of neuroscience you do. All right, we'll tell you about that later.
Sorry, yeah, I do human neuroscience. It's all whole human experiments.
Okay, excellent. I'm married to a neuroscientist. So anyway, long story. Thanks.
I think I can go next. So that's my name is Giuseppe, and that's my second call. I recently knew about Frictionless, and I work as a researcher in Switzerland in energy informatics at the App Research Institute, and I work at the intersection between energy and geodata. And so I've started recently contributing to mostly data flows to possibly to implement pipelines for geodata.
All right, I'll go. I guess I'm the last one. So I'm from Datopian. Basically, I'm still studying in the Bachelor in Computer Science. So I'm not really involved directly in many projects, but I've been working on a frictionless CCAN converter because we work a lot with CCAN internally. So we've been working on this. It's been a few months since we last touched it, but we're going to retake it. And basically, yeah, that's the kind of project I'm involved in, more in data science than frictionless, but yeah, hopefully I'll jump more on board later
on. Sebastian, do we have other agenda items before we have Ilya and Emma present?
I don't think so. We've been through all items. I guess if Oleg wants, we can share his thoughts that were from like 2 calls ago. We didn't get to speak about this, but I guess we can start with the presentation if you're all fine with this.
Sounds
Awesome.
good.
Ilya, whenever you want.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for having us. So I'll just share my screen. No, I think I need to have it enabled before I can do that.
Okay, let me look into this. Yeah, for some reason it gets disabled every time. It should be on right now.
Okay, great. And so I'll just share my stuff. And yeah, so I'll cover kind of a few slides of what we're working on and how we're using frictionless, and then Emma will also pick up some of the presentation. So I'll start with the what we're working on. So we're working on a format called WACZ, and but before I get to that, just a little bit of background of kind of who we are. So the Webrecorder project was started in 2014. Then it became part of Rhizome for about 4 years. And now, again, it's an independent project. And our focus is really on development of open source tools for web archiving, which is basically building tools for people to capture and replay the web as accurately as possible. And so Webrecorder itself is not an archive, but it built tools for others to create their own archives. And the idea is to make that as easy as possible. And obviously important to web archiving is the actual web archiving data. And so that's, so I'll be talking about that today. And sort of what is the state of the data formats in web archives? Well, actually we use all very specialized formats. The main one currently is called WARC, which is created by the Internet Archive and is now an ISO standard. And it basically contains the raw HTTP response and request data. It does not contain an index. It just basically has the raw data there of the HTTP requests, and the response is all stored for access later. Then another format that we commonly use is called CDX or CDXJ, which is a plain text index for WARC files, basically plain text with each line representing a URL and timestamp and additional metadata, and it's typically sorted for easy binary search. And those are basically the two formats. The CDX format is not even standardized in any way, and there's no formats for page full text search or any other metadata. And so with traditional web archives, like Internet Archive and others at various national libraries around the world, they store terabytes or petabytes of data. And that raw data is generally not exchanged, partially because it's so big. Some archives might offer work files for download. I think Internet Archive offers some of their data for download, but not all of it. And generally access to this data is provided via the Wayback Machine or other specialized APIs. And since each institution sort of has its own policies of how they store metadata, full text search, and page list, it means that there's really no portable way to exchange smaller collections. And that's really hasn't been their focus, because if you have terabytes or petabytes of data, you're not really thinking about how to allow people to download that, store it somewhere else, and share that. With Webrecorder, our focus is on much smaller archives in the megabytes or gigabytes of data rather than terabytes and petabytes. And so we definitely are thinking about how to make these archives portable. And for that, really need a portable data format that can support this. And we want to transfer not just the raw work data, but additional metadata, essentially anything that's needed to access the web archive. And so that's why we're proposing kind of yet another specialized format for this that is geared towards portability. And that's where we introduced the WACZ format, which stands for Web Archive Collection Zipped. And basically, this format can contain multiple types of web archiving data, which we'll cover, and also the data package.json. So it acts as a frictionless data package. And all the files additionally are packaged as a zip file for portability. And kind of, again, what are the use cases for WACZ? It's not just we're solving a technical problem, but also sort of a social one. We really need to have more than just the raw HTTP data that can be passed around. And so we need the random access index, which is the CDX. We also need a list of pages that point to URLs that users can start from. So if you just look at a work file, it basically has all of the URLs that are part of a web archive, including all the JavaScript, images, CSS, anything that might come from a web page. And most of those files are not sort of starting points for someone to browse from. And the page list provides a way for us to kind of point the user to pages that are important and are actually browsable. And so we bundle all of this data into a single file using the zip format, essentially. And kind of a neat bonus of this is that because we're using zip, the WACZ format supports random access, which is really important. So we can load from the zip file, we can actually load on demand small parts of the zip file without downloading the whole thing, and access the index, and then from that, based on that index, figure out where to access the actual raw data and load that from the work files. And so that allows for efficient access to larger web archives over the web. And so now I'll turn it over to Emma to kind of talk about the details of how we're of what is in the WACZ format.
Yeah, so WACZ, like Ilya's been saying, is basically, in the simplest terms, a zipper for a work file. And right now it contains the following folders. So if you were to unzip a WACZ file, you would get an archive folder, an indexes folder, a pages folder, and a data package.json. So I'm just going to kind of explain what purpose all of those serve. The archive contains the raw sort of web archive data. Usually it's a work file. So if you created a WACZ file from an existing work file, it would be added in the archive folder. So if you unzipped it, you looked in the archive folder, you would see the full original work. The indexes include the various indexes in the CDX format or the CDX.jz and IDX format. So I think right now you can basically either store, either pass a flag and have the indexes be stored as a CDX, or get a CDX.jz file along with an IDX file. And these are just indexing the pages that you pass in the work file. So it looks into the work file and indexes all of those pages so they're easily accessible. And then the pages folder is slightly different. We recently, originally there was a separate full text search that would create a separate folder, and we recently kind of combined that functionality into just the pages.jsonl file. So basically, if you opened up the pages folder, you would see a pages.jsonl file, which is a list of page objects in JSON format that would have a valid URL, a timestamp, a title, an ID, which is optional. The title is also optional, and text, which is an optional extraction of the text of the page. So that's one of the features I'm going to talk about in a minute. But basically, you can pass a flag to WACZ and get text extraction. It's optional, but it's one of the more powerful features in terms of making web archives that are human readable and useful. Because if you have the full text extract, you can really easily set up full text search of every page in the archive. So if you're dealing with a really heavy, complicated archive with a lot of different pages, this makes it a lot easier to find resources. And then the data package.json file. We've basically used this as the manifest for the web archive. Our current implementation is pretty simple. We use either MD5 or SHA-256 to hash the resources. We try to follow the frictionless standard. And we also support additional metadata that the user can pass in. So currently we allow the user to pass in a title, a description of the archive, a main page URL, and a main page timestamp if they want to specify an entry point into the archive. Yeah, and so how we've actually implemented it at a code level, we're using the Python frictionless library to validate our data package.jsonl file. We don't want to stray from the standard that the community has set. So when there's a validate function in WACZ, you can validate an existing WACZ to see if it's formatted correctly. And we use the validate functionality from the frictionless library to ensure that we've correctly formatted the data package. And we also manually check that our resources have accurate hashes and refer to pages that actually exist. So we want the data package to be a really useful metadata object in terms of archiving and researching. So we're trying to conform it to frictionless standards and also have it include some of the metadata that users might find particularly useful for this case. But yeah, tools for working with WACZ. So we have PyWACZ, which is the reference implementation in Python, which basically allows you to get the command line tool. You can create WACZ files from works, page detection, or specify list and additional metadata. Includes optional text extraction via boilerpipe, which we kind of talked about. And like I just mentioned, it will validate existing WACZs, so it'll check the data package using the frictionless check, as well as check the zip file structures and revalidate the hashes, like I mentioned. So for user tools, you can go to replay webpage, which will allow you to load the web archive files directly in the browser. It supports WACZ as well as raw works. You can load web page archives on demand. Wabak.js is a core JavaScript library for reading WACZs in the browser. So that's very useful. And soon we'll have a archive web browser extension, which basically allows you to archive as you browse and export WACZ files, and it can be validated using PyWACZ. And we don't have that. I've used a version of that, and it's very useful. So it's a really neat little tool.
And I'll actually try to do a quick demo of this, so you kind of see what we're talking about. And this is still very new, so it might break, but we'll just hope that works. And so the idea with this is that we'll have a browser extension that allows you to archive essentially as you're browsing. And what does that mean? So here we are on the Frictionless data page. So I go to the extension, and let's see, maybe I'll create a new collection here called demo, and then I'll start. And so what this does is it's archiving everything that's being loaded in the browser. And so you can actually see the size counter here going up, and it's basically loading and storing all of the URLs that are loaded just on this page. So it's entirely user driven. It's not doing any kind of crawling. It's basically just archiving the pages that I browse. And so I click on this page. So this page is archived. And so it kind of allows for very much user directed archiving. So I click on another page. And let's say I go to, let's say I can even archive social media this way. So I would go to, let's say I go to Twitter in this case. And so again, it's archiving just the things that are currently loaded. We'll have additional functionality to help automate this later. And then, so let's say I'll just click stop and I'll browse this archive. And let's see here. Hopefully this worked. Okay, so we see that this, yes. So I can start with the first page that I've archived, which is the Frictionless Data homepage, and I should be able to click on these pages. And so what you're seeing now is loaded entirely from the web archive. So if we were not demoing online, I could disconnect my connection and show that this is still being loaded. I can click on the tools that, or on the pages that I've previously browsed, and I should be able to click on the Twitter page. And so basically this provides kind of a list of the pages that I've visited. I think that actually visited more pages than these two, but I think, and kind of the complexity of this is that things are loaded via, without doing a full page load, it will not show up in this list, but it should be in this archive. And so what I can do then is, so this is working in the extension. I can then download all of these pages as a WACZ file, or as a plain work. But as we mentioned, the WACZ contains all of the additional metadata. And so I've now downloaded that. It is on my machine. And I should be able to, see here, I should be able to, if I go to my command line, I should be able to, using our, if I wanted to, I should be able to validate, let's see if this works. So we have the PyWACZ installed here, and so I'm validating that this WACZ file is valid. If I do unzip on it and kind of show what's in there, you can see that it contains kind of these, just so it's a little bit easier to see. So it has kind of the data package, the indexes folder, the archive folder, and the page list. And what I could also do with this then is using the replay web page tool. So this file is now on my machine. I could open it directly. I could also put it up online and share it with anyone. And then you could basically just open this file and browse it on essentially in your browser. So this is loaded entirely in the browser. And again, I can, it does not require to have the extension installed to browse it, only to create the data. And I have the kind of basically the the few pages that I archived should be here. Twitter should also work. And this is all loading from that WACZ file. What this also supports is, so these are the pages. We also support, hopefully the full text search works. So if I search for frictionless, you can see that it finds some results. Maybe if I search for Twitter, it should find the Twitter page in particular. Maybe, so if I search for guide, it'll link to that. And I can also search by URLs as well, which is sort of, this is kind of the raw data that's only in the work file, but I could also filter by that. So there's multiple ways to kind of, from a user perspective, to look at the data here. And all of this is loaded from a portable format, the WACZ format. Yeah, that's basically the idea, is to have this kind of format for exchanging small amounts of web archive data. Again, we're talking about megabytes and gigabytes, not terabytes and petabytes here, but this should scale at least to, and has been tested with tens of gigabytes of data so far. Yeah, that's kind of the general idea. And can contact us at via email, or also we have a forum where about general discussion about Webrecorder. And I guess we're kind of here to answer any questions, or if you have any recommendations, since we're basically creating kind of a new format from scratch, building on existing formats, of course, but this is sort of the intent. And if you have any feedback for us, we're definitely happy to listen. And thank you for having us.
Well, I just want to say it's really cool. Like, just thank you so much. That was really a great presentation, and I love coming on these calls. I didn't get to introduce my Rufus. I was kind of, I wrote most of the frictionless specs and started the project. But I just really love finding out about cool. I mean, the project's cool in itself, and I love it that obviously it's using the frictionless in some useful way. That's always really heartening. But I think it's super cool, and I know exactly the kind of. I haven't been so involved, but I know about that space, and it looks really, and really got slick. So yeah, great demo, and just want to acknowledge that, Emma and Ilya. That's really great. Thank you so much for demoing that. Yeah, and I'm having, I don't know, like just for me, I guess I'm thinking is that I do a lot of stuff where I'd love to be able to kind of like web clip, like open source web. For years I've got written, I have like ideas list on my hard disk with like, you know, like the ultimate web clipping tool sort of thing, you know, like you know, like, and there's so many of them, they're always either they go out of existence or they're proprietary or something, but something which allows me to, you know, clip websites and archive them in the form that they were or whatever. And so I can see, I'm already thinking of installing the browser plugin, but I'm just like, my cogs are wearing. But yeah, just really cool, and really thank you for the demo. That was great.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, and I should say that this builds on previous work that Webrecorder has done. So previously, Webrecorder also has, it started as a hosted service, which is now run by rhizome.org, a nonprofit based in New York. And that there, the data is stored in sort of on their servers. And we plan to add WACZ support to that as well, so that we have a kind of a way to exchange data. And there's also a desktop app as well that's built in Electron that basically does the same thing. And then kind of making it even easier to use is the basically the browser extension approach. And so kind of, yeah, the idea is exactly that, to allow users to archive or clip in a way exactly what they're browsing, and then have their own, have a copy of that's kind of in a standard way that can be read by others and exchanged easily. I guess one question that I had is if it makes sense for us to do more with the kind of the smaller data or the other data formats that we're using, since we're not using sort of JSON and CSV, and we're using kind of all different formats that are not.
it makes total sense. And I think that, I mean, that's one of the points. Data package is designed, you could use any, like the resources can be any format, and you can add the structure. I mean, it's kind of, you've got a kind of useful example there, because you can also imagine applying that to other things within the web page. Like, you know, there might be other resources on a website that you're wanting to archive. Yeah, I mean, I need to read a bit more of like exactly the fields you're using by default in the data package, but the data package, is it the resource list, the list of pages, or do you have an array? Yeah, exactly.
So in our case,
it's the list of items in the folders.
Items in the folders. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yep, and we're basically using essentially the actual list of URLs, and it's sort of packaged in the work file, since that's already a standard. We didn't want to kind of mess with that essentially. So we basically just take the work file and we package it in along with additional metadata, so that if someone wants just the raw work file, they could still get it out of the zip file. Yes,
that makes sense. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And like, what if any, like, have you? Yeah, no, I think that makes sense.
Okay, great. Yeah, and then we'll try to kind of build on the spec a little bit more, and kind of essentially the main page. Essentially, all of the work is happening on GitHub in this repo, which including this is sort of the main repo for this project. And again, feel free to open issues or any other questions or comments about this. And
I have a question or a comment about it, and one really interesting stuff. This might just be kind of a general comment about web archiving in general, but what do you see as the uses for this? I mean, are you going to try to target like journalists, people who need to like have strong records of evidence, journalists, lawyers kind of types, or do you maybe also kind of find value in like offsite or offline hosting? And kind of along with that, is there currently kind of good network capability? So if I have this hosted on, if I have like my WACZ on one server or like one of my computers, would it be easy to kind of build a interface to network that with like my entire network, maybe if I'm in a remote location or something, or somewhere with internet connectivity that isn't great?
Yeah, so in a way, all of the above. I think that, yeah, there's definitely many use cases, and we're kind of trying to figure out who could definitely benefit from these tools. And obviously, one sort of use case is sort of kind of the existing institutions that already do web archiving. If they want to have some smaller collections, which sort of if they're existing sort of libraries and kind of museums that archive their own web content, they could store things in this way and make them accessible. Because this sort of another part to this, that's sort of how it's different from the kind of the I guess traditional Wayback Machine approach, is that everything is loaded in the browser on demand. So there's no server infrastructure required to host a web archive. So it's basically just any static storage will work. And yeah, so basically you could store it on your own network, and then essentially using replay web page, you can load the archives. It's also possible. Kind of, I'll share a quick demo here that we've made of embedding this into other pages. So the idea is that you can embed web archives as easily as you can embed, for example, videos and PDFs. And so this example from Glitch shows you how you can do that, and it's loading. So I shared this link in the chat. So basically, this is kind of a page hosted on Glitch that is itself loading a web archive in an iframe, and the archive is loaded from a WACZ file. So basically, and there's an example HTML embed of that. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. You basically put an HTML tag with a point to that points to the WACZ file, and it renders as an iframe like this in the browser. Of course, you could also, there's many ways to use this as well.
I also see a real potential value, not just for activists and like journalists, but also for archival institutions and art institutions. People that are trying to archive like old web works, I think this would be a really big benefit for. I've worked on a couple of projects where I think that this standard would have helped.
Yeah, maybe just I'll provide one little additional comment. So like, thanks for the answers. I think maybe one of the things that's really drawn me to Frictionless certainly is, and seem kind of similar to you, is that like a lot of people do work with small data or like moderate, medium-sized data, and the tooling isn't always there that kind of does exist for the big data. It just has a lot of support and a lot of backing behind it. So really appreciative of people focusing on kind of small data efforts. It's a big benefit.
Yay, small data. Yeah. And today and tomorrow, today's big data is tomorrow's small data.
Time to take any more questions if people have them. Otherwise, I think we don't have any more items for our agenda for today, unless Oleg wants to share some bits of information, but I think he preferred to leave that for January.
I always use the time. I know I came a bit late. I had another work meeting, unfortunately, at the beginning of this, so I missed a bit at the beginning. But just in terms of like 20, yeah, if people had the time, and people feel free to drop, but I've always loved to have a bit of this kind of discussion points of where we're going on things and what we should see in 2021 around frictionless. So yeah, I would put that a little bit on the agenda of like what we're working on.
Sure.
And what people would love to see us. Okay, we could add that quickly. I mean, one thing for me is to basically, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the kind of the roadmap for frictionless at the moment is mainly like the specs are pretty kind of stable at this point, but mainly around some of the tooling and particularly the consolidation. And we're doing the tooling in the Python and JavaScript libraries. I guess one question I have also for people is like, always, there's a phrase someone I work with recently was telling me like always, I don't even know the phrase, like always bet on black, which is I think from Passenger 57, but always bet on JavaScript. So I've kind of, I used to rather look down on JavaScript as a language. And I was a Python man for a long period. But one of the things I wanted to kind of test is generally there's quite a bit of work going on the Frictionless JS library, at least from the end of Datopian. And I increasingly see that used even for like low level data kind of wrangling and things like that. Not so much in Node, but in the browser, like you just like a lot that you can do that way. So we're going to put a fair amount of work into that. And also the point that if you have the core library, you can embed it into a desktop, you can make desktop apps, you can make a browser app and so on and so forth. But yeah, I just don't know, like out there, whether most people are Python people or whether they see, the other area, the other end of things that I've seen data package and stacks used for is just a lot in like, if you're building, people talk about small data, if you're doing visualization work or data wrangling in the browser, which is normally around visualization or presentation of data, often things like table schema and even data packages is extremely useful as like a minimal viable way of describing and sharing around data. Like you're building a React app to do some kind of dashboard. It turns out you kind of need to describe, little data resources and display them and stuff like that. But I just wanted to kind of ask on the call if anyone has had experience like that, what kind of features they'd want out of Frictionless or of a library around it as we're building that out.
I just want to say that that would definitely be useful for our use case. And I think actually with these tools also kind of started in a similar way. The initial implementation of kind of this web archiving stack was all in Python. But then obviously in order for it to run entirely in the browser, it needs to be done in JavaScript. And so over the last couple of years, I've implemented a lot of it in JavaScript as well. And so right now we're using both. And the WACZ format is, well, our main implementation is for the format is in Python. We also have a JavaScript version as well. And definitely we need both, especially if we want to load the web archives in the browser. So that would be helpful for us.
Yeah, we're going to do more work on the WACZ JavaScript implementation, I think, next year.
Okay, that's cool. That's good. Exactly. It's the kind of the way everything ends up in JavaScript. Like kind of, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like, you know, I was even some of the developers who not on this call, but who work, you know, Datapian who work with us, who joined us, like they're doing all of their machine learning. I was like a bit shocked like, when they came and worked with us. They're doing all a load of their machine learning work in like TensorJS, you know, and I was like, I thought it was always, you know, like I was a bit shocked that it was always like Python or R or something. So I'm like, I think that's definitely a tendency. Yeah. So, okay, that's really good feedback. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, from my side, I have, as I said in the beginning, at work with Swiss Pol Institute, all our tooling is Python at the moment, and I don't think it will move anytime that I can see. Sorry?
If you're already on it, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but when you were asking what we would like to see in Frictionless, besides more improvements and anything Frictionless Pi for the schema collaboration tool fund, I would like to see the create.frictionless.io, so the tool to describe datasets from the browser better, more user-friendly, more loved. So even if I'm a Python person, I wanted to say that improving the JavaScript tools, it helps as well.
Yeah, like you should definitely be able to open a data package and preview it in the browser. I mean, there's some kind of there's actually, yeah, that's one of the kind of outstanding items there's a command line tool. If people maybe, I don't know if people know this one, which is sort of is built in I'll put the link, and it's going to move into the Frictionless. It's basically built on Frictionless JS, but it's kind of a command line tool which you could do, but it's built in pure JavaScript, and you could like show, you know, data, like data. It's a command line tool called data, but you could do like data show or data cat. You kind of present your data package in the command line tool or in an HTML file. But yeah, like that's a really good suggestion. That's like a focus. So what I'm hearing, if I'm getting it, Carlos, is being able to basically take a data package and kind of preview it in the browser or create a rendering it in the browser really quickly.
I was thinking more on let me open it and paste it. What's the create.frictionless.io?
Yes. Oh, the create library. Okay. Well, that by the way, that from my end at least is being worked on, and it will, again, is because I don't think the original, I never liked that app.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Because
I found it kind of useful. I used that when I was working on developing how we would create the data package.
I agree. I mean, having anything that does something like that is useful. I just think there would be a nicer UI of just how we created data packages. But I agree. I helped build it, and I'm responsible partly for it. I've just been meaning to make it better, you know, for years. But okay, great. Yeah, you want an improved version of that, and there's a React, like an entire React stack called DataPub for kind of like even doing stuff like creating storage, like if you want to, like, yeah. So I'm working on very heavily, and I think that will become the basis, whether it's that way or maybe there's a different way if Genny wants to do it. But basically, I think that we'll be doing a significantly upgraded create app. You want to probably create, validate, and kind of show. Like, it'll be really cool just to be able to put a data package in a browser URL and like have it like validate it, like, oh, this is correct, and here's what it looks like, kind of, you know, that would be kind of cool as well, I think. So
yeah, what's useful for us is to help scientists to describe data.
Yeah.
So the infer, fantastic, and then it still needs manual input for describing human things. But some of the errors on the create.frictionless.io, they are meant for programmers. It shows the regular expression. If you know how to read regular expressions and JSON schemas, it's fine. If you don't,
it's not so good. I got it.
So
can I ask a question to that then? What would allow you or someone, because obviously as a community project, we also need, like, it really makes a difference with pull requests. At the moment, like, what would mean that you're able to, like, at least provide feedback or like even pull requests? Like, you know, maybe if it's in JavaScript, it's just not your language, but that's a good question for people of, like, what would lower the barrier to like things like that, like fixing error messages, you know, is the kind of classic, be great for pull requests. Is there any tips on what would make that even more accessible for people to fix things?
I had some experience with the Create Frictionless, and again, it has been fantastic. So I've opened probably the last 2 months 5 or 10, I said around 10 small bugs, and they are all fixed or planned to fix. So if anyone wants to open bugs, they get there. I haven't done pull requests mainly because of the JavaScript side, because I'm more like a Python person, and this has been something kind of stopping me to put my hands more on that side. But I'm sure that other people here, like Ilya, I guess, and Emma and others, probably have more JavaScript mind.
I'd be I'm just really interested in the idea of like a visualization. I feel like somebody like mentioned that a moment ago, like a visualization capability, I think would be really valuable. I can definitely see a use case for that for us, of just being able to kind of spin up a really quick map of what's in there. I think that would be really valuable.
Yeah, exactly. Like a kind of very simple browser would be kind of cool. Yeah.
dbt does something like that, and it helps. I use it a lot. dbt is like an SQL management thing that lets you create like a giant graph of all of your SQL basically. But they have a graphing feature that lets you host it on localhost, just pull up this kind of really quick visualization and check how things are interconnected. And it's very useful when you're dealing with something really complex.
That's great. That's a really good suggestion. Thank you. Well, that's it. If anyone else, I don't have time to get people to check out, but yeah, if anyone else has suggestions, and thank you so much for sharing and for people participating, and yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. It's really enjoyable to be on the call. Look forward to joining the next one, and I appreciate the conversation today.
Yeah, thank you again for having us.
Yeah,
thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, and we'll post it. I hope to post it all online soon and write up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye, everyone.